We're live, YouTube. We are live. Bitches, and welcome back once again. This is Amuni Israel. It's 2019 of the Gregorian calendar year. But it seems that it's the same old stuff. And I know sometimes I take a little time to come in. So come in, share the videos. If you're enjoying the content, share it. I take some time out the day to not just regurgitate a lot of information that we see floating around, like this particular story that we're going to speak about. I'm just seeing it. I saw it this morning. I'm not even going to lie. But then I was busy. So I didn't know, sometimes you see stuff, you don't know where to place it. And so, like I said, greetings and welcome, everybody. So I saw it, and then I just kept going about my day. And then I keep seeing it and seeing it and seeing it. And it's kind of really just, I guess it's giving you the what happened. And then after you get the what and you try to understand what is happening continually, and you see the motives, depending on the comments that the people are sharing or what news outlet is sharing it, and then they spin it this way and they spin it that way. So today, if you haven't seen it, we're going to talk about this. What's it called? The young woman who was assaulted, and I have names here. Oh man. Who was assaulted by a man at a McDonald's. Hold on, let me go ahead and get this, my little sheet here. All right. I had to go take notes, y'all. I had to go do a little research on this stuff, so that you have your facts straight instead of just jumping to conclusions. I have some stuff I want to read. We're going to read for some Thomas Jefferson in a minute. I should read from Thomas Jefferson now before I go. That's what I'm going to do. Let's start there, shall we? Hope everybody's doing well. I'm talking about what happened recently. I think they said it was December 31st, but I want to read some from Thomas Jefferson notes on the state of Virginia. So, he was president. This is one of his memoirs and notes and all of this stuff like this. So on page 168, speaking about the particular customs and manners that may happen to be received in that state. And he was speaking, so I'll just read. I'm going to jump down a little bit. The whole commerce between master and slave is a perpetual exercise of the most boisterous passions, the most unremitting despotism on the one part, and degrading submission on the other. So unremitting despotism, I'm saying the word wrong. It's like being despotic. Despotism on one side and degrading submission on the other. So the slave master is oppressing, essentially, in pretty flowery words, and the person who is of left power is being having to forcibly submit. Our children, he's talking about, because he's European, so he's talking about the slave master population, see this and learn to imitate it. For man is an imitative animal. This quality is the germ of all education to him, meaning monkey see, monkey do. From his cradle to his grave, he is learning to do what he sees others do. If a parent can find no motive either in his philanthropy or in his self-love for restraining the intemperance of passion towards his slave, it should always be a sufficient one that his child is present. But generally, it is not sufficient. The parent storms, the children looks on, catches the lineaments of wrath, puts on the same ears in the circle of smaller slaves, gives a loose to his worst of passions, and thus nursed, educated, and daily exercising tyranny cannot be stamped out by it with odious peculiarities. The man must be a prodigy who can retain his manners and morals undepraved by such circumstances. I felt that there's certain things I outlined here, but I have to go back and read this book from the beginning because there's some stuff I missed. But he's sharing some stuff here. Basically, monkey see, monkey do. When there's a power structure that's going on, and someone feels as though they are more empowered than the other in a situation, according to the history of this particular country, And that slave master slave dynamic, one feels they have the right, if you are not moving and behaving in the way in which they have the right to touch your physical person, they feel they have the right to curse your physical person. They feel they have the right for you to be sold away and lose your job. Now, I'm going to, because they say, oh, why are you always talking about it? Because it's relevant. Thomas Jefferson said that in what, 1770 something? I didn't say that. Okay, so now fast forward to, you know what I mean? They said it was like 6 o'clock in the afternoon. So fast forward to a couple of hours before so-called 2019. I don't want to lie. Thomas, when did you write this, Thomas? See Thomas Jefferson? He wrote that. Okay. One of the founding fathers, he wrote that. So this is let's see here. Thomas Jefferson, the third president of the United States, was born in Shadwell, Virginia on 1743. Okay. He's born in 1743. He helps to draft the Constitution in 1783. And he's aware of many things. Okay. So this is his notes here. 17, 18, 19, 200 plus years ago, Thomas Jefferson drops these jewels, okay, about this power dynamic. So here we are. I have to do the math, y'all. I'll have to let y'all wait a minute to do the math. But here we are in 2019, and this huge news story has gone viral. I noticed today, I don't know if you guys noticed that the news is paying so much attention to social media now that in every line of story, they have to say it's going viral. That means it's relevant. That means people are talking about it on social media. That means you have the power, we have the power, that they begin to cover these stories. So 2.5 million views on this video that originated off of a customer. And the customer's name, this is in St. Pete, Florida, so it's out of Tampa, TJB and Duty. Sorry if I missed the name. Okay. The person and his mother was in the McDonald's. And this is an altercation between the customer and the employee. The customer is a European. He just turned 40, according to the report, man. And then the employee is, they didn't say her age, but her name is Yasmin James. And she's a young melanated girl working at McDonald's. So I'm thinking about this story. I'm like, okay, we got three things going on. We have economics. This is her job. This is what Thomas Jefferson is speaking to, this economic disparity from those who feel like they're the master, which would be the customer. I pay you, without me, you wouldn't have a job. I have the right? And then you have the employees, that's the one that's being employed. McDonald's and other spaces such as these fast food establishments are notorious for underpaying their employees, okay? So you have that going on. Then you have the racial divide going on, which in this case is kind of the same power dynamic, where the empowered European is now going against the seemingly disempowered melanated individual, be it man or woman. But we have this European man to melanated woman is that dynamic that existed during slavery, and it's one of the back and forths. It's one of the undercurrents that oftentimes we don't shed enough light on. And then the third thing is the gender. So we have economic, we have racial tension, and we have gender tension. All of these things are going on. Amuna, how in the world did you see that at 50-something seconds worth of video? Because I watched that video. I don't know, man. I watched it again. I'm like, what did he just say? I watched it again because I'm watching a lot of the comments and the people are just like naturally just reacting. And I'm like, no, there's a lot of stuff going on here. But I'll continue. And I put the links in the box for the article. So Newsweek wrote about it. News One wrote about it. Blavity wrote about it. I went back on the page of the individual who posted it, and they said, according to their testimony, this was about a straw. Okay, this was about a straw. So if you look in the beginning of the video, it seems that there was tensions building before the video goes on. And when the video goes, they must have been like, yo, something's about to pop off. So they turned the video on. And this is where you see the man having his tray. He has his receipt in his hand, and an exchange is happening. And from that exchange, he feels empowered to reach over the counter and snatch Yasmin across the counter. And he wasn't ready for what was supposed to happen next. I don't know if he thought that far or really, really calculated how this was going to go. But essentially, she just went buck wild on him. I counted it because that's the type of person I am. I'm like, how many hits did she land on him? It was about 12. It was about a dozen. She started connecting because he wouldn't let her go. So she started just connecting, to the head. And what upset a lot of people, because they took it into, depending on who you are, you take it into the space that your injury is. A lot of people took it into, there were two employees and a manager standing there, and no one really stepped in for her. And so she had to defend herself. So those melanated women took it to, well, who do we have to defend us? You know what I'm saying? Again, there's so much stuff going in. Where did the thought come from that you don't have someone to defend you? So when we say that, and not to say that there was no accuracy in that thought, right? But you still have what would have happened in times past if this was an overseer and these were either your brother, your husband, or your sons watching on, and they step in. If the melanated man gets involved in such a thing, we see all throughout the news that he's more than demonized just for walking down the street. So I find it interesting when the tables are turned, how the onlookers view whether or not he's a threat or she's just defending herself. And so because we live in a society where for a long time she was left to defend herself, everybody's applauding. Good job, you defended yourself against an onlooker. I even read one comment of someone saying how many daughters would be able to defend themselves in that way. If you don't know what I'm talking about, it's a video that someone captured at a McDonald's in St. Pete, which is in Florida, close to Tampa, of where an altercation apparently broke out over a straw. Of course, it's being covered all over. So it's going to put a racial spin on it, which it is there. Oh, let me go on to what he said. So according to the report, this man, Daniel Taylor, he was arrested and charged with 2 counts of first-degree battery because he did reach out and he initiated the fight. So he was charged with those. I think they said it's either a year in probation or $1,000 fine, something of that nature. But I found his comments interesting. And that's why I went back to see what Thomas Jefferson was talking about people emulating their environment and feeling empowered, even though they were wrong. So his comment essentially to her was, do your job, B. I was just asking you whatever. You can't really hear it clearly in the video. But after she finished pounds on him, he says, do your job, B. And then he proceeds to walk over, which a lot of people are upset about, walk over to the manager who may look Hispanic. And they walked over to the manager and says he wants a refund. The manager was like, business as usual. You know what I'm saying? Oh, I didn't see that. And you can hear at the end of the video him saying, I want a refund. And then have the nerve to say, I want her fired. You see that entitlement? The thought that you can assault an individual and then call for her to be fired. That behavior, as Thomas Jefferson said, he did. For those who just joined us, I'm going to read what Thomas Jefferson said again. That behavior comes from somewhere where you can be the aggressor in this power dynamic. You could be the one who assaults someone, and then you can be the victim at the same time. So he essentially says he wants her fired. And then police report, according to 911 police report, he says he called 911 and says that he was attacked. So shout out to those who followed up on the story, because the thought was that the manager later on, when the video went off, he gets in an altercation with the manager. And when they try to escort him out the store, he kicks another young woman, melanated woman, in the stomach. I think her name is Tatiana Bell. So he kicks her, he argues with the manager, and when he gets put out. So he's clearly aggressive. He's clearly not all the way there to just go into an establishment and start attacking people. However, some people or melanated news outlets were pushing back on this thought that I think it was a Newsweek, or they may have changed the title, but someone tried to justify it by calling him a transient, meaning, move from place to place. He doesn't really, so trying to justify the behavior. And so one of the pushbacks of the article, these article titles are interesting. One of the pushbacks is thug. What is the pushback? Thug. Hold on, I don't want to even misinform you what one of the pushbacks is. Hold on. because I put all of the article links in the box. So one of the pushbacks is, hold on. News One's article says, okay, it moved. Oh, here it is. White thug attacks black employee working at McDonald's. You see how everyone is, but that is something that I think for me, when I saw it, it rings true to what would have been said if it was a melanated man. Like the other day, I read stories about a man who was just, I think, taking the young girl he was babysitting or whatever, and because he was melanated, it went as to think that he was doing something to these young girls at Subway. So it's like kind of turning the lens around in the same way in which media has demonized melanated people. Blavity's headline is McDonald's customer loses his white mind and puts his hand on black female employee. So you understand what I'm saying? The way in which it's titled tells you the angle of which it's coming from. But a lot of the stuff I'm reading, doesn't really get us to the root of what and why and how and where do we go from here. Hot topic, yes. No, he wasn't ready. Speaking real, he wasn't ready. He wasn't. I don't want to laugh, but dude wasn't ready. Like he may have been like hungry. You might have had too many to drink. I don't know what was going on with you, but you thought you just roughed up like the wrong one. So let me get back to what he wasn't ready. That's all I gotta say. She connected 12 to the head and then came back with like, where's my phone? But what I found, before I go back to what Thomas Jefferson said, one may say, oh, she was an angry black woman. And I'm always on the lookout for this thought process of the person is angry, this, that, and the third, because the way she unleashed on him and then didn't stop, you could tell that there was a lot going on. And in addition to that, he became someone else in the way in which she expressed herself. And shout out to everybody who just joined us. She called him. Let me see if I can let me just go ahead and get the audio for you. How about I do that? Let me get the audio in case you don't know what I'm talking about. I found her choice of words interesting. To listen to all of these things, she called him a ninga, a naga, okay, and he's clearly a European. And then she called him a P, you know what I'm saying, a woman genitalia, the words that the young children using, you pee, blink, not, I mean, I'm like, wow, that's an interesting string of words that you chose to use. That's an interesting string of words. So this energy that she has is not just for that particular incident, because a lot of our women have to defend themselves on a daily basis. And so think about the pressures of having to move through and defend yourself in that manner and be ready to throw bows. She didn't retreat. You know what I'm saying? She didn't cry. Her initial instinct was, I'm about to show you what it do. And how much that weighs on an individual. What society, and we already know, so I'm just asking rhetorical questions so that I can get to the sound of the video. Please apologize for the profanity. But what reality does she live in? Is St. Pete, I'm a little bit familiar with St. Pete. What part of St. Pete is she from that she has to not only have those words in her vocabulary, but be readily available to use them? Hold on. I'm trying to find. What did I say his name was? For those who just joined us, thank you for joining us. I'm going to read Thomas Jefferson, but I want you to hear Biandudi. Bi. Hold on one second. No, there we go. I know he didn't expect, and his mother didn't expect capturing this that would go so far. But the reality is if we don't, use the tools that we have to capture certain moments, then people pretend, or they're allowed to pretend, that these things don't exist. Okay, so here we go. Okay. So that is the video. Sometimes when I watch things like that, it really like to watch it. It like upsets my spirit. But like I said, what environment, what stresses is she under? Because this is apparent that she unleashed the fury of everyone who has ever bothered her. You know what I'm saying? On that that's why I think he wasn't ready, because he must have thought she was just gonna wilt away in his arms, and that wasn't the case. So there's, like I said, there are racial issues going on here, there are gender issues going on here, and there are also economic issues that are going on here. What gave him the right, or what made him think he had the right to put hands on her? So I started off by reading this Thomas Jefferson outtake, and I will possibly end on this here. And hopefully it gave another perspective on what's going on. Mojo, it's disheartening. It's disheartening that you see the co-worker trying to pull her off of him, because at this point they're like, oh, get off of him. But I think economically, when you look at the manager, when you look at so many people being fired, people are thinking about themselves first. People are thinking about what is corporate going to say. People are thinking about the protocol. You understand what I'm saying? Because even once you're in uniform, how is it going to affect your livelihood? That's why I said there's an economic element here. Those who are, it's on video, those who are standing around are going to have to account for what has happened, what's continuing to happen. So it's layered. It's not just one issue that arise. But the good thing is, he claims, she says she was going to call the police. So there were 2 police reports, and his police report was all twisted that he was attacked. But it's not the first time. I forgot what I was watching. So I finally did get to watch the long song, and I bought the book because I didn't get to see the last third part of it. But in that video, in that movie, that was a take on the book. And then I'm gonna read Thomas Jefferson. They were Jamaica farmers. These Europeans came from England, and they were farming sugarcane in Jamaica. Okay, so their particular farm wasn't as profitable as they had wanted it to be. And so ultimately, the man who owned the farm, because a lot of them did this when the Europeans, when they don't see their way, it's kind of like when, the stock market tanks and they take their life and things of that nature. It's all over, so they try to take themselves out. So in this particular scene, the man who owned the farm took himself out. But what happened was, let me backtrack. In the story, which is this true part of the narrative, is that the Christmas rebellion in Jamaica happened where a lot of the slaves started to rebel, enslaved individuals started to rebel. And so word was spreading like, yo, we free. So in the story narrative, the young girl whose name was July, she was like, we're free. So Chief was free to take her love interest and lay in the master's bed. That's exactly what happened. So they was laid up, they was all booed up, laid in the master's bed, and then the master ended up returning. They was like, oh, I thought they was, because they packed the master up, like, get out of town. It's no safe for Europeans here. They're going to take you out. You better run. Okay. For those who don't know, I kind of switched gears a little bit so I can get to this pinning the tail on people who are innocent. We see the same thing in Emmett Till's case. We see that in the same thing where you cry wolf, and he really didn't do it. So in this particular narrative, when the master comes home, they didn't know where to go. There was nowhere for them to go, so they hid under the bed. When they hit it in the bed, he comes home and he takes himself out. They witnessed this. It was so shocking that the sister and another European runs in the room. When they discovered that they were hiding under the bed, the first thing he turns to him and says, I'm going to tell them that you did it. So instead of admitting that the European took his own life, he looked around for the nearest melanated body to blame or pin it on. And this is not new. There's many people even in today's time who are coming out of jail for crimes they never committed. Okay? And so to hear that he called 911 in this narrative and ran and told them that he was assaulted, this is a practice that we must address because it's something that it happens ongoing. You understand? But last but not least, I'm going to read again Thomas Jefferson notes on the state of Virginia, something that he says, and I thought it classified or gave us the characteristics of the offender perfectly. He says, the whole commerce between master and slave, because people still have that mentality, is a perpetual exercise of the most boisterous passions. He was loud, yelling and screaming, and she was insolent in his mind because all I did was ask you to do this thing, and you have no right to push back on me. That was one of the favorite words that I came across that they would like to use. The person is insolent, right? You don't want to do your job. You don't want me to push you around and feel good about it. You see what I'm saying? Because not only were you supposed to do the job, you were supposed to smile when you was doing it, which I thought was really just okay. The whole commerce between master and slave is a perpetual exercise of the most boisterous passions, the most unremitting despotism on one part and degrading submission on the other. Our children, like the one that's crying right now, see this and learn to imitate it. For man is an imitative animal. This quality is the germ of all education in him. From his cradle to his grave, he's learning to do what he sees others do. If a parent can find no motive either in his philanthropy or in his self-love for restraining the intemperance of passion toward his slave, it should always be sufficient one that his child is present. But generally, it is not sufficient. The parent storms, the child looks on and catches the lineaments of wrath, puts on the same ears in the circle of smaller slaves, in this case, the McDonald's worker. Okay, where am I? And gives a loose to his worst of passions, and thus nursed, educated, and daily exercised in tyranny cannot be stamped out by it with odious peculiarities. The man must be a prodigy who can retain his manners and morals undepraved by such circumstances. So, in short, this individual saw this type of behavior somewhere in his life. He saw women being beat somewhere in his life. He saw, you know what I'm saying? Somewhere, this is not me saying, this is Thomas Jefferson saying that he felt somewhere that he had the right to put his hands on somebody. And this is the culture that he grew up in, had to be somewhere. Because after that, you were so entitled that you said, she should be fired. So not only am I going to assault you, I'm not wrong behind it. And I'm still putting my power, into use by saying what should be the end of you. So I know some people will say, but she wasn't doing her job. Again, we don't know what happened before the tape went on. We don't know the exchange. We do know that both were cursing. So whether or not they cursed each other before the camera went on, whether or not somebody was incited, we don't know. We'll just have to wait for that information to come out. But that's what I was able to ascertain, soulonomically, of course, from this exchange. It's sad, but this is 2019. And I'm reading stuff from 1700s, and it's still applicable because the healing nationally, community-wise, has not been done. And so the outrage, it's one thing to outrage, is another thing to understand, is another thing to address the issue and begin to acknowledge that this is what's fueling it. You know what I'm saying? Where people say, how can we get over it? You went into a new Gregorian calendar year going viral by the same thing you would have seen with the slave master doing in the field 300 years ago, which is assaulting a melanated woman's body while everyone stands by and watch. That's eye-opening. Well, with that said, I want to thank everybody for tuning in. If you're new to the channel, go ahead and click subscribe. We have a lot of information here as it relates to things that are going on in our community. If you're new, I speak often about looking at the trauma that happened socially, economically, spiritually in the diaspora, and looking for clues round about us that proves that this trauma is still very present and needs to be addressed on both sides, not just black against white, white against black, on both sides, because ultimately we now have to begin to identify, acknowledge, and own the parts that we play, because we're continuing to perpetuate the trauma. Right? We're continuing to perpetuate these things in our music, in our thoughts, in our taste for certain things, in our desires. We're continuing to feed these things. And so all of these things are very necessary and very expansive, but one by one we can get to it. So thank everybody for tuning in. That was a lot. That was a lot. But we'll talk again. Soulonomics 101. Bless.